Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Saturday, November the 8th. And welcome to our commentary. I was looking at some images of November and autumn, and I think we'll put one up in a future video, but it's fabulous. I mean, one of the things that I remember when we first came to the United States, of course, we didn't have all these seasons when I was a little boy in Cuba. We didn't have that. We just had, I guess, summer in the tropics and a little bit of winter, but not a lot. I mean, I don't ever remember hearing about snow in Cuba, or maybe some freezes up in the mountains, but very rare. But anyway, so I was fascinated with all the colors of the fall, the autumn. And I just happened to see some images earlier today, and I was trying to upload them. I think we'll do it for another program, but I'm just amazed at the colors of the autumn. That was something in the fall, November, of course, all these colors leading to Thanksgiving. So I'm fascinated by that. And if you have never experienced living in the fall, in the autumn up north, then you need to try it one time. Even just go on vacation up there for a few days, or maybe go on visit family or friend somewhere up in the north during Thanksgiving, because that's the one time that I used to love the most. The images of the fall as we get into more and more of the month of November. Well, we're going to be talking today. I have a post over at the Supreme Court today talking about this decision that the Supreme Court made yesterday or Thursday about passports and, selecting your gender, if I could put it that way, or putting on the passport whatever gender you believe you are. And the Supreme Court said, no, it's got to be your biological gender. And this is a lawsuit. I'm not sure if it was brought up by the Trump administration. I'm not exactly sure how it happened. It was probably an executive order of the Trump administration that was challenged and ended up in the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court clearly said, no, the government has a right. It's not discrimination to force you to identify yourself with the right gender. If you want to be another gender in private or have a private life, that's fine. But on the passport, you're either male or female for obvious reasons, identification. It's just like a driver's license. You're either male or female. So anyway, I just thought that was a very interesting opinion of the Supreme Court, and one that frankly makes a lot of sense to me. You may have heard that the Supreme Court yesterday put a halt on this decision by a district judge, I'm not sure where, who was saying that the Trump administration had to come up with the money for the SNAP program, the food stamps. I think they had to go into some reserves or whatever to pay for the food stamps. Look, I understand that there are people who are going to be hurt very badly by this, and I'm not minimizing that. And I sympathize with them. We have a pantry in our church, and I see people going there who really need help. And that's fine. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be helping each other. But I don't know how this judge got the idea that he or she could tell the president of the United States. I don't know what authority the judge has to tell a president to do this or do that, especially when the food stamp program is a consequence of the shutdown. I mean, the reason that the checks or whatever goes out has not gone out is because the government has been closed effective September 30th. The federal government and all these programs and all these agencies ended on September 30th, which is the last day of the last fiscal year. As you know, the federal budget goes from October 1st to September 30th. So everything ended on September 30th with the shutdown. And right now, all of those programs don't have any money. There's no budget for them that has been approved. Now, the Republicans had said, well, let's just have a continuing resolution so that we can fund these programs and let's keep negotiating. The Democrats said, no, we don't accept that. They have their own requirements. The bottom line is that a lot of people are getting hurt by this, whether it's the airports or the food stamps recipients. And I really don't understand the Democrats' logic here. Why not just get back to negotiation and then figure something out when you're negotiating. So anyway, that's what is happening right now with the food stamps and the Supreme Court. But it's interesting that I looked at a number today that's fascinating. The Supreme Court has basically sided with Trump 92% on these appeals. All these district judges who have challenged the president, 92% of the time when it goes to the Supreme Court, President Trump is winning, which, makes a lot of sense to me because he's acting within Article 2 powers of the presidency. And it's also bad for these judges who I think have decided to get more into politics than they should. And so anyway, so Trump is winning, and I'm pretty sure he'll win this other case in Oregon where a judge says that he couldn't introduce the National Guard. I mean, come on. That has already been debated in other states, and Trump won on that too. So, I just think that, these district judges, I understand we need district judges, but I think they've gone way too far in my opinion, politicizing their decisions rather than simply understanding that that's a decision that the president has. And as I say, 92% of the time, President Trump has been winning these appeals to the Supreme Court. Well, I got to tell you something very interesting that I saw today. All this talk about Tuesday, and on Tuesday you had all these people predicting the end of the world for Trump, and oh my God, the elections in November are going to be a disaster for Trump or whatever. Well, I said no. When I first heard this, I said these elections in New Jersey, Virginia, were fairly predictable. I mean, I thought the Democrats were going to win. The only question I had was frankly in New Jersey, where I thought that Cacciarelli was going to make it a lot closer. It certainly looked that way in all the polling data. But I think the polling data, once again in New Jersey, turned out to be wrong. That's the second time. The last time they had a governor's race, the polls were completely wrong. And this time, many of them were completely wrong because nobody actually, maybe a few, but most of the polls had this thing getting closer, including one that had it within 1 point. Anyway, but these were predictable Democrat victories. And, many in the media were going, oh my gosh, this is an indicator of where we are. Let me give you a little bit of information to put that down a little bit or explain that better. The Cook Political Report. This is one of these agencies that looks at the House of Representatives. Not too many people get involved in polling the House of Representatives because, first of all, it's more costly. You've got 435 districts. You got to poll, and it's more complicated because sometimes getting a sample in a district is hard to do. So few people do it. The Cook Political Report does it. They've been doing it for years. At the moment, if the election were held today, they predict that the Republicans will hold on to 213 and the Democrats will hold on to 206. 213, 206. Now, the magic number is 218. And they believe that 16 of the districts are up in the air right now. So basically what that means, again, according to the Cook Political Report, and they've been a pretty reliable agency over the years, of the 16 that are still pending or up in the air, the Republicans would have to come up with five out of the 16, and they have a majority. The Democrats would have to come up with 12 out of the 16, and they have a majority. So that's basically where we are right now. The election is going to be decided in like 16 districts. And what happens in those 16 districts, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. As you know, historically, the party out of power has done well in these midterms. So, are the Democrats going to pick up enough of those 16 pending districts or up in the air districts to win? They may. But again, the situation right now, you would have to think, based on those numbers, that it favors the Republicans, based on the numbers. But a lot of things have changed over the year. A lot of things are going to change. And, I think it's too early to make predictions, but people like to do that, especially on Tuesday, you had all these people saying, oh my gosh, this is a preview of the end of Trump. No, it's not. Just relax. It's not. There's a lot of things that are going to happen in 2026 that are going to be a lot more important to what happens in November of next year. And one of them is the economy. Now, I happen to be optimistic. I think a lot of these balls that Trump has in the air right now are going to fall down to his benefit, but they may not. And if they may not, the Democrats are probably going to win. But if they do, I think the Republicans win. But it's all up in the air right now. That's my point. And I think to be making these predictions of what's going to happen a year from now, it's a little bit, it's more politics than, frankly, anything else. Well, a couple of things on this day in history. 1932, on this day in November, that would have been November the 8th, 1932, Franklin Roosevelt was elected president of the United States. He ran against President Hoover. And that, of course, was a pretty consequential election. Roosevelt was president 4 times. He was elected 4 times. The only president ever to do that. He also was president during the Depression and then later World War II. Very consequential president. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected on this day in 1932. And then in 1960, on this day, John F. Kennedy, Senator John F. Kennedy, defeated Vice President Richard Nixon to win the presidency. That was a very close election. The FDR election was not close. He won fairly easily. But the Kennedy-Nixon election in 1960, that was very close. And in fact, many people were urging Nixon to have a recount. It was extremely close here in Texas, in Illinois. I mean, it was very, very close. The popular vote was decided by 114,000 votes out of the 77 million people who voted. So it was very, very close. But, Nixon eventually conceded and Kennedy became president of the United States. But on this day in 1960, Kennedy was elected president. And in 1932, FDR was elected president on this day. A lot of elections. We've remembered a lot of elections this time in November, because this is usually when the presidential elections happen, the first Tuesday of November. Well, have a great weekend, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas. We'll get back together on Sunday night with our friend George Rodriguez. We'll talk a little bit about the Senate election coming up here in 2026. Very interesting primaries. There are going to be some very, very exciting primaries, particularly for the U.S. Senate. So we'll talk about George a little bit about that. Thank you for your time. Have a great weekend. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas.